Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it is a big sore spot for a lot of city league players in our era. One of the biggest sore spots is the fact that during our time in high school, there was a long strike for the newspaper. So there was not a lot of coverage, as much coverage as there should have been. And I stepped out and crossed states and was by myself. Part of it was me being able to look in the newspaper in the library and see that my brother has rushed for 103 yards on 3 carries and 2 touchdowns. He was very good motivator when it came to that. And keeping us on task, talking to us when we're in trouble, when our grades are slipping, and then the position coaches, on a different level, getting more in depth with us and working with us individually. And the one thing that I think Scott Browning did real well is he was a great motivator. I walked on with a hundred other people, and only 10 people made the squad.
We're back with one more down. Today we have a good friend of mine, teammate, mentor, blueprint, if you will, Reverend Dr. Stephen J. Russell Jr. Stephen Russell was a tremendous player for Edinboro University, a native of the Northside of Pittsburgh, coming out of the Perry Traditional Academy, as it's known now, class of 1989, played on some tremendous teams, 87 and 88. I believe you guys were runners up for the city title that year to Brashear in 87 and 88. And really the foundation of what was a state championship team in 89. I'm so excited to have you on today as a guest. You were a guy that I really respected, looked to for a lot of my early transition into college football. And then, just seeing what you've done going forward with your life is just a testament and an example of the young man that you were so many years ago to a older, more mature version of that.
Well, thank you, man, for inviting me. I appreciate that. And I'm proud of you, man, and looking forward to watching this podcast even grow more. For all the things that you have done, it's a good platform that you've created. So thanks for having me here.
Appreciate that. My partner, Dallas Saunders, he unfortunately couldn't make it on with us tonight, but I'm sure when he gets a view of what you're about, some of those topics that you bring to light, he'll really enjoy that. So again, I'll thank you on his behalf and just give you my appreciation up front for agreeing to be a part of this. So we're going across state lines from our normal base. We go across into Western Pennsylvania. Me being from Youngstown, Ohio, you being raised in Pittsburgh, we're talking about the 1970s and 80s, two very tough steel cities that are really grounded and founded in that game of football. To get started, could you give us some insight into your youth growing up, your family dynamic and what that means to you?
Sure. I come from a tight-knit family in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We grew up on the north side. Actually was, for the most part, raised by a single parent. Myself and my brother and my sister, my brother Derrick, who you are familiar with, who played at Edinboro with me, and my sister, who is 9 years younger than us, were raised on the north side. Grandparents were really involved, and sports was a tremendous part of our upbringing. In fact, it's almost as if sports has been our savior, in so many words, in a matter of speaking, because in Pittsburgh being a place where we were familiar with a winning tradition, and at the time growing up, and seeing 4 Super Bowls, in just a short span of our lives, it just created a vacuum of opportunities for the community to come around. So sports had a lot to do with our upbringing and family as well. So this was way before the influence of gangs and drugs at a larger scale that we experienced in the late 80s and 90s. So it was tight knit community, and the neighborhood was always gathering around for athletic activities.
When you think back to that time period of your life, I imagine it's somewhat similar because we're within that same generation. Um, Youngstown is a place that's at the time was teeming with competition, whether that be, racing in the streets, riding bikes, competing with backflips, getting into organized athletics. You got challenged as soon as you were able to come off of the porch and be a little bit out of the sight and the control of your parents. Was that a similar experience for you and your siblings growing up in your neighborhood?
Oh, tremendous experience. I would say that it was heightened for me because Derrick, my brother, we're 10 months apart. So, we were competing against each other a lot, which gave us an opportunity to rise to the occasion when we had to compete with others outside of the house. But it was highly competitive. Yeah, I mean, we couldn't do anything without, it being some type of competition. And this is not competition with your fingers, playing a video game. I'm not talking about the Glass Joe, boxing or playing Atari 5200. We wasn't even thinking about that. We were outside talking about who was going to be the fastest. We raced from our house to grandma's house, and everybody was always doing the same thing at the courts, whether it's baseball or basketball included.
Now, with you being the firstborn, in terms of birth order, have you always kind of been in that leadership, take the first step position throughout your development?
Yeah, pretty much I have. And like I said, it was a little different because my brother and I are so close in age, but because it was a part of the culture that the oldest would be the one that it becomes the leader, he would reluctantly follow. So I would have to give a little bit extra, to actually get him to concede to it, and it worked until he got a little bigger than me after a while. Right. But when he got bigger than me, I got a little bit more assertive. So yeah, man, that definitely has had an impact on our upbringing. Mm-hmm.
Well, talk about that for a little bit in context of being from that north side of Pittsburgh, growing up in an urban area, when we're growing up, fights and things of that nature are just part of, your development as a young adolescent or youth. But, did growing up in those neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, being in an environment where there's lots of competition, lots of different perspective, lots of different angles, you know, uh, how would you say those things shaped you and added to the mentality that you took into athletics?
Well, I think that it shaped me, had a big part to play, in shaping me. I always, say in life that you ought to put God first. Family is everything. Adversity is necessary. Education is an opportunity, and the last that I would say is that discipline is important. Discipline and adversity. Though that adversity is necessary piece. You have to be able to defend yourself and go through the struggles that happen. So it was intimidating, especially with older cats who were always around, but one of the things that we learned is that it was all a part of us developing, as a neighborhood. We could fight, and do all that, but at the end of the day, if it was we were in another neighborhood, it was almost like we were siblings, if we weren't siblings. So the fact that the competition factor was even with the hands, you could do that then, and then go back to being friends again in school, even when it came to different school rivalries. Oliver High School was on the north side, just like Perry High School is on the north side, and we would have our little feuds. But at the end of, if we having a conversation with people who are from the west side, then forget the fact that it's Perry and Oliver. We're from the north side. So all of that had a role to play with it. It's just tough because kids are cruel, and we just don't know what we're doing. Our parents didn't like it, because then again, our parents probably all grew up together. So it did have a lot to do with it.
I spent small periods of time over in Pittsburgh. I had an uncle that lived on Anaheim my whole life up
Wow.
until he passed. And I used to come over there in the summers. He would get me. He was a much older man. He's the oldest of my father's set of siblings. So, he would take me around the different pockets of the city. We would ride up over by the old Pitt Stadium. And then, he was teaching me, giving me lessons, giving me a foundation in how to operate, how to handle yourself as a man. In our pre-conversation the other night, you spoke about the influence of your grandparents and, how they impacted your upbringing during some transitional parts of your early life. Can you speak to that for a little while?
Yeah, grandparents. I thank God for my grandmother and my grandfather. Just like I do for my in-laws with my children. What they are putting into their lives is exactly what my grandparents put in my life. They were heavily involved. My grandfather dropped out of school in the 8th grade to get a job and moved from Clarksdale, Mississippi, up to Uniontown, Pennsylvania, to work, in the plants and the steel mill, and then wound up working for the post office. And he was the wisest man that I've ever known. Very militant, very Christian. My grandmother was the foundation for us to make sure that we learned how to love each other and love God and to go to church, even though it didn't always happen. That influence was always there. With coming up in a single parent home for most of the time, we would spend a lot of time there. We would go to our grandparents' house after school. We would do our homework there, and it was just a marvelous thing to have people who are in what is considered the silent generation not be silent, but to pour into us what is important for us to know: his family history, what it means to be a strong Black man coming up in a world that is juxtaposed to, what raising us and helping us and wanting to see us succeed. So it was a pretty impactful thing to have when you're coming up. A lot of kids don't even have their parents in their lives, both parents. So when you have a grandparent, a grandmother and a grandfather who have been a couple for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, I think that has a lot to do, has an impact on people, and it certainly had an impact on me.
As you begin to form that athletic identity and get into those organized sports, what's your early pathway into organized athletics and competition, in that team environment?
Yeah, there was a guy named Sam Baskins who started the Northside Spartans, and that program was Pop Warner style football from age 6, 7 all the way up to 13, 12, 13. And we played in that athletic program, and that played for that athletic program for baseball and for football. But football was our saving grace. It was the most successful of the program. So these were community guys who would volunteer to coach, professional athletes who have been retired. Actually, Bobby Lane, who was a legend in Pittsburgh from before the Super Bowls, was my coach on a Little League football team, my first coach. So, to see people giving back. Franco Harris lived in the community. We used to run in and out of his house, all the time. He would pour money into the program. Things that people don't know about the Pittsburgh area is that, a lot of the organizations that helped us survive in the summertime and when we're not in school were supported by some of the athletes in the area. So, that is what introduced us to football, and they put a lot of time in with us. They paid for all of the equipment. I mean, back then, mom and dad would have to come up with maybe $35, $40, and I know that wasn't. I mean, it probably be more like a couple $100 now, or close to $100 and $150 now, So they had found a way to do it, and the help of the extended family and grandparents. They knew that we needed to have some extracurricular activity because it wasn't no sense in us getting punished. I mean, us getting being in the house, sitting in the house, and that wouldn't do nothing but make it harder for them with all that energy that we had, busting up the walls. And mom wanted us out. And so by the time we came home, we would at least take a shower, eat, sit down, and then fall asleep.
When you're getting into those early experiences playing the game of football, myself, I got put out there 2 years too early for my age group, and I wasn't oriented to that physical contact, getting up early and hard work. We're talking about being a pre-first grader, and somebody's talking about doing two-a-days when you're 6 years old. I'm not coming for the second practice. So I ended up quitting my first, venture into playing organized football and didn't return until sixth grade. Uh, when you start getting into that contact and, learning the game in an organized fashion, do you have that instant proficiency, or is it something that you have to grow into?
Well, for me, it was, to be perfectly honest with it, without telling it all, I mean, I had to tell some of it. I was a confused and angry young boy. I was angry that my mother and my father weren't together. I was angry that my mom struggled. I was hyper. They wanted to put me on ADHD medication. And my mom, thank God, she refused to let them put me on those meds. Said all I needed was some activity, and that's the truth with a lot of youth, is that they just have a lot of energy and need an outlet. So because of those two combinations, I was able to excel in the game of football because I could be aggressive, and it was a way for me to release a lot of anxiety, and then on the flip side of it, get encouraged and taught and inspired, getting the attention that was needed to help me to learn how to control myself and to see that there is value in me in spite of the stuff that I was disappointed with at an earlier age.
Now, in Youngstown, during my time coming up, we generally transition from that little league level up. We were able to play up to 7th grade at the longer end of little league football. But then we had the junior high system that fed into that high school level program. What's the layout in inner city Pittsburgh during that time period for you guys?
Say that again.
What is the structure like for that transition from one level to the next level in Pittsburgh during that time? Do you go from little league ball right to junior high ball, or is junior high ball not a option in terms of football in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, junior high was not an option. That's why when I was talking about the football program starting from age 6 and going all the way up to 13, 14, it was like really simplified: little team, medium team, big team. And after you are on that big team, you should be making your transition in the high school. So if there's anything that was a gap, it was for the people who weren't able, for whatever reason, to make that jump from that last level of Pop Warner, Pop Warner 2.0, 3.0 to high school. As a matter of fact, you may mention at the top that I played for that period in 87 and in 88 and 89. I didn't play in 87. My brother played, but I didn't play football in 87 because I struggled academically in geometry and didn't have the grades. So I played basketball for 4 years, which was a whole other story and influence in my life. But during the time when I couldn't play football in that year, there was a program up in Northview Heights, ETW, and a guy who were named Reggie Ward, who had a football program for guys who were not able to make it on the high school level. And so I played there for a year, and it was football, hard knocks. Hard knocks, right? So there weren't too many programs like that, but we would play other programs across the state that were in that same category.
Now, there's tiers to what is the entire encompassing area of Pittsburgh. So you all have WPIAL surrounding that area. You have the Pittsburgh City League, and then other versions of conferences throughout the area. Was there any feeling of discrepancy, or that one version is preferred over another, or in your opinion, was the Pittsburgh City League on par and on tier with some of those other conferences and other communities throughout that area during your time?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it is a big sore spot for a lot of City League players in our era. One of the biggest sore spots is the fact that during our time in high school, there was a long strike for the newspaper. So there was not a lot of coverage, as much coverage as there should have been. And back then there wasn't no cell phones, rapid information. The only thing that the saving grace for us was the news stations. And since we were in the city, they had segments for the city. But the city was very, very underrated when it came to the WPIL. In fact, the City League champions and the runner-ups were not able to go to the WPIL into the WPIL playoffs. So when our season was over, our season was over. Even if in 87, undefeated season, best team, one of the best teams in history, second to the team in 1990 that period that broke all their records. And they had a squad out of this world. They couldn't even play Aliquippa. Aliquippa had a great squad in that year during that time too. But there wasn't a platform for us to compete with the Whippel at that time. It wasn't until after we left that they were able to start making some exceptions. And when they made the exception, Perry High School went to the state championship and beat Berwick, one of the teams in the state that was always winning it. And it kind of made it clear officially that it was a tragedy for them not to let us compete with the Whippel.
In doing the research, preparing for you, there's a lot of great players that come out of that city league. Some of those names I was certainly familiar with because of our time at Edinboro. You would see guys throughout the conference that were really good high school players. Coleman from Slippery Rock. He was one of those names that popped in and out of the paper. I see Jody Dickerson, doing his thing over at Stowe Rocks. And then, the bigger guys that went on to get larger Division I scholarships, the Major Harrises. He's an alum of Perry, I believe.
Brashear.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My mistake on that. But even so, the type of players that come out of that city, I know for myself as an Ohio guy, we have a certain level of reverence for the brand of football that we grew up playing and the competition that is Northeast Ohio and throughout the state. My father's side being from Pennsylvania, they're from the Beaver Falls, Wampum area. They made their name known throughout the state during their time. So I was always familiar with the great tradition and programs on that side of the line. Not necessarily in the know of all the guys that came through the city of Pittsburgh, but I got to have an appreciation for the type of attitude, the effort, and the mentality that is bred over on that end of the state. Just during my time as a collegiate player, facing different guys from different areas over there. If you could, how would you characterize the brand of football that you guys were taught, and how did that aid you in becoming a college player?
Well, it was a tradition that was very deep in Pittsburgh when it came to high school talent and us to follow in the footsteps of the Major Harrises that went before us. Major Harris was one of the greatest athletes that I've ever seen in my life. I watched him throw a ball while he was parallel to the ground, 50 yards, this high off the ground. From about this high off the ground sideways, 50-yard strike. I have a sore spot for that because we lost to his high school every year of my high school, every year of my playing football in the city championship. We were highly competitive, but there were people on that team that went on to be successful too. There was Michael Booth. He played at West Virginia. And then there are other people, Ramon Hart, who played with me and graduated a year after me. He was player of the year and opted to go to Slippery Rock, because he was smart with making sure that he got his education and he had opportunities to go to other places. But there are other people like Mike Reagan, Darrell Porter, who played at Pitt, were great. Ray Zellers, who played at Oliver High School, the high school that's on the same side of town. He wound up going to Notre Dame, playing in the NFL. We all came up desiring to get better and to be better for the generation that was before us. And then when we left, you have other people who started coming up, like Curtis Martin. Curtis Martin didn't play until his senior year, and that was 2 years of us being removed. And you see what he went and did. Rod Rutherford, who was one of the superstar quarterbacks at the University of Pittsburgh, who had come close and broke a number of Dan Marino's records. I mean, Pickett knocked everybody else out of the water when he came through. But the list goes on. There's more people who can be mentioned that went before us and played with us. But it was just that history that we had to meet. We had to excel to that level. And if you really, really wanted to be a baller, then you had to do whatever you could to break their records and eclipse them. So that was always the mentality.
Now you had that great experience of being able to play with your brother pretty much your whole career. There's nothing like having somebody that you know in and out and can count on and motivate, and even have them pick you up when you may be down a little bit or lagging. Can you talk about some of those moments that you remember playing alongside your brother as a high school player?
Yeah, D was a great running back. Yeah, very very athletic, and one of the people who I will say I have an invested interest in it. So people might not take what I have to say about it that serious. He got a raw deal in high school and in college. He excelled tremendously in high school, and was probably second to one person in rushing. But I mean, just to play with him and to watch him, he's so graceful and a compliment to my skill sets. So our sibling rivalry at the time was so fierce that we made sure that we were giving each other our best. So I excelled more on the defensive side of the ball in college. And while he was a running back in college, I actually went to Central State and played at Central when he was a freshman at Edinboro. And I was part of a legendary team, a legendary coach, and Billy Joe, and played with people who went on and played in the NFL. But then things didn't work out at the school, so I had to transfer. And when I transferred, it was very easy for me to see that I would be able to be successful because of the success that my brother was having. I'm saying if my 10-month younger brother is up there balling, then I need to go up there and put some work in because he can do. I know I can do better.
I'm glad you touch on that. Now, certainly you got to come over to the Buckeye State if you want to be anybody that's, worth being mentioned if you're talking about the game of football. On a serious note, Central State is, our state's beacon as far as HBCU culture goes. And you're right, at the time that you would have been coming into there, you're talking about some legendary players playing ball at the NAIA level, winning championships year after year. What was that experience like for you in terms of culture and finding yourself as an individual away from home, and not only away from home, but that separation from your closest ally, essentially? How does that experience impact you as you try to make your way finding your place in college football?
Well, like I said, and we were talking about being in our generation and being from the North Side, and how it can be intimidating, when you're in those kind of situations when you got to use your hands. All of those type of things are what has to stay with you as you grow and be tempered. So when I stepped out and crossed states and was by myself, part of it was me being able to look in the newspaper in the library and see that my brother has rushed for 103 yards on 3 carries and 2 touchdowns. I didn't get a scholarship at Central State. I had to walk on. So I walked on with 100 other people, and only 10 people made the squad. So I walked on, gave it my best, worked out, and made the team. And for all intents and purposes, I played with. I was on the scout team as a freshman. I'm not saying I was on the field, But I played with Eric Williams, who went on to be a superstar of Dallas Cowboys and one of the greatest offensive linemen they had ever had. I played with Roosevelt Nix. Roosevelt Nix played for the Bengals. Actually, his son is a fullback for the Steelers. Now, I played with Vince Buck, who is also one of the best athletes I ever seen in context. Played defensive back. He is a punt returner, unbelievable punt returner. He played for New Orleans Saints. And being out there, out of state, around a bunch of guys that are from all over, and seeing that, I was no longer the fastest person, but I still worked to get better. And even though things didn't work out, it turns out that one of the coaches that was the scout coach wound up leaving that year to go and become a scout for New England Patriots. He went on to be a scout for the New England Patriots, and I came across him when Cleveland came to Edinboro to do some work with some of the players that they were looking at when I was coming out of college. So it's just funny how stuff works out. If I didn't go to Central State, I don't think I would have had the gusto that I had when I transferred, because I realized that if I can make it, out here on my own and succeed and make some noise, then, I really have what it takes. So it was a big confidence builder.
Now, for you and I, we know what Edinboro is. We know what the PSAC conference represents, and what premier Division II football looks like. For those that may watch this and not be familiar with what Edinboro University is in terms of football, as you're coming into that situation, I know for myself, I had opportunities to walk on at Division I schools here in Ohio, but being a young 18-year-old guy going through that process on my own, a lot of it was ego based. I had those opportunities to play Division I football as a preferred walk on. Couple schools at the Division II level came in late. And then, obviously you have those opportunities at Division III, Mount Union, which, they've been a perennial powerhouse at that level. But, for an 18-year-old kid, my pride wouldn't allow me to go somewhere where I felt like I was a second option, or just well, let's see what this one develops into. So, for myself, being recruited by Edinboro, they made me feel wanted. They gave me an indication that I'd be able to make an impact earlier on in the career versus waiting 2-3 years to get playing time. Mm-hmm. For yourself, as you go through that experience where you have to earn your way as a walk-on, to in a program that's, a powerhouse at the very top of their level. And then you're coming over to the PSAC conference. What is that experience like for you as you arrive at Edinboro, and you're inserting yourself into a situation that may already be put together? Can you walk us through your process and your transition to Edinboro University?
Yeah, sure. Making that transition was an opportunity for me to show everybody what I had, and also to exercise this chip on my shoulder that developed, because unlike you, I wasn't fortunate enough to get the looks from D1 schools, or most schools passed me over. And I don't know, I guess it's because it wasn't a lot of footage. And my brother was just the superstar. I mean, it was like he got all of the looks, and rightfully so, but at the same time, it was just not that fortunate for me. So when I came to Edinboro after having, the confidence and the builder that I had being at Central State, I came in with a chip on my shoulder, man, and was just determined to let everybody see what I had. And I wasn't taking no for an answer. So it wasn't, there was no anxiety, for me, because I knew what I could do. And my, we call our spouses our better half, right? So I'm not gonna call my brother my better half, my little half. Seeing him do what he did, I know if he watched this, he'll have a whole lot to say. All the way down in Texas. You watch this, D. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, because if he was able to do that, and I'm like, oh man. And then I ran into, I got the opportunity to play with guys like Michael Barnes and Mario Houston. Those guys were successful on the high school level playing in Cleveland, and it translated on the field. So getting to know those guys and working with those guys just didn't do anything but make it better for me.
When we're talking about that Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference, for our side of the division, which was the Western Division, you're talking about a national powerhouse in Indiana University of Pennsylvania. You have a really good program with Slippery Rock University, Clarion, Lock Haven's on that side, Shippensburg is on that side, and Cal University of Pennsylvania is on that side. I would characterize my acclimation to that Division II level same as you, having a chip, feeling like you have something to prove because you inside your heart, your mind at least is telling you I'm better than where I landed. But as you get into that program and you're introduced to the culture, the coaching techniques, and then you start to play that competition, you soon realize that, when it comes to a game like football, some of us are a tenth of a second too slow in our 40. We may not have the weight to play at that Power 5 level. We may not look the part. We may not have had the opportunities to be featured in our offenses or defenses at that lower level in high school. And for whatever reason you come there, you soon find out that it's high competition. It's a good brand of football to play, and you still have to prove yourself. So if you're out there, if you're on the field, you've earned that. You worked your way into that. It's not just that there's an opening and somebody has to fill it. You have to actually rise to the occasion and show that you can catch on the concepts, know what your assignment is. When we're talking about the coaching staff that was there during our time, we have Tom Holman as the head coach. Coach Scott Browning was your position coach, my position coach, my first year. And they brought a high level of intensity and demand for our program. The conditioning test that first day, that's an eye opener for a kid coming out of high school or transferring from another university. You may not be prepared to be put through that grinder like that and then turn around and practice and get right to it. You mentioned some of those great names, the Michael Barnes, Mario Houston, you have George Lewis, yourself. There's a level of excellence that is translated beyond the game of football for a lot of those guys that came through that program, that came through that conference. You get ingrained into that culture and competing, and it just carries over into other parts of your life. When you first come, I believe you play outside backer the first year.
I played Willie, yeah, because the defense was different. Yeah, so they put me in at Willie. Yeah.
And then, they eventually move you to the strong safety position, which right. is, where you were in my way of being a superstar in 93. So I had to take some time and learn what it was to be a college football player. Guys like yourself, Mario Houston, you showed us what intensity was what intensity was needed to be able to compete and be successful at that level. Guys like Rick Walker, who was the free safety during that time period, he brought a level of intelligence to the position. And, I learned a lot from him because we were similar body type, very tall, very lanky, not a lot of weight, but knowing how to line up, knowing how to use angles, knowing, where to be in relationship to what's going on the other side of the ball, that carries you a lot further way than just being a physical specimen or talent. For yourself, the way that you played the game, you leave as the career interceptions leader at the end of your 4 years. We both came up under Coach Tony Elliott for your last season, and then my last 3 seasons. He brought a level of preparation to the position that I had never experienced before playing defensive back, and he challenged us. Do you have any thoughts or anything that you can recall from playing under Coach Browning and playing under Coach Elliott that you took along with you in life, and then the tools that you use on the field as a player? What did you learn from each one of those guys' styles?
Well, I thank Tom Homan for the opportunity, to be on the team and to take the time to speak into our lives, from a head coach perspective, because I think that regardless of what coaches do with their coaching style and teaching offenses and defenses, special teams, a coach has to be a leader and is a father figure. And the one thing I give Coach Holman credit for is taking the time to pour into us and talk to us about life, because football is life. So he was very good motivator when it came to that, and keeping us on task, talking to us when we're in trouble, when our grades are slipping, and then the position coaches, on a different level, getting more in depth with us and working with us individually. And the one thing that I think Scott Browning did real well is he was a great motivator. He was a great challenger, because I think that they wanted to just put the best athletes on the field. And when it came to the defense, when it came to the secondary, they wanted to free us to be us a little bit more than try to force us to fit into some type of category. There's pros and cons to that, and I'll get into that in just a little bit when we flip the switch to talk about Coach Elliott. But Coach Browning was a facilitator, and with us, that legendary defensive backfield that I was a part of in '92 with George Lewis, Mike Barnes, and Mario Houston. We fed off of each other, and we just studied film all the time, and spent time together all the time. So I think that he was able to not be more like a big brother to us and let us be more free, as long as we showed him the respect of doing what he asked us to do and being in the right place and just accepting the responsibility when we're wrong. So I like Coach Browning from that perspective, because he knew how to keep us on the same page. Coach Elliott was just totally mind-blowing to me. And I think that it is a tragedy that people who I've played with that didn't get coached by him, because he brought another level to playing defensive back, because he played in the NFL. And, some of these coaches, they're good at what they do. I'm not saying you can't coach if you didn't play, but there are some people who can coach when they didn't play, but Coach Elliott is somebody who played the game and he could coach tell you to be in the right place. More sexy, sophisticated defenses, disguising stuff and showing you the next level. Not just expanding you from algebra to algebra 2, but taking you to calculus and trigonometry, and simplifying it, where you're at the point where you like, oh, that's all you got to do. And it's like, yeah, frees you up. And it was phenomenal. It's just, I wish if I could go back again, I would say, all right, if you let me go back, just give me Coach Elliott, let him coach me up. Because he's just a player's coach, and I love that guy, man.
Now, when we talk about Coach E, we can't not talk about the criticism and how it stung when you would get criticized in field. Only those that were in that dark room with that clicker running back and forth, and you hear plus, minus. When you hear that X, it's going to be another 10 minutes explaining, why you think you're right. And then, he's going to break down every element of your technique and where you should have been. Even if you made a big play in a mistake, he wanted that excellence and that, do it the way that is supposed to be done. Because while you might have survived on this play, there's going to be other points in the game where if you gamble, you take that chance, you're not in position, you open up that weakness for the other 10. So playing under him and going under, being a part of his guidance, and I didn't realize this until years after sports ended for me. But, just him talking to you in that way, challenging you in that way, and making you think beyond yourself, it gives you that wider perspective that prepares you for life beyond football, life beyond college. So I had that opportunity to thank him, as a grown man, just for the way that he handled us, because on the other side of just the X's and O's and the being his player, he cared about us. There were times he would drop off packs of chicken, and in our day, of course, you couldn't get extra benefits. They were that was non-permissible. But there was times you open up your door and there's a bag of groceries, and we knew who it was from. With you having probably about 6 or 7 picks that last year that you played for him. When you go to the sideline and say bingo, you got a little extra something to, take care of yourself through the week. So,
right.
There's that appreciation for care. Now, touching back a little bit, you talk about that group of 4 preceding your time with us as younger guys. Myself, my career was heavily influenced with Marty Williams, Keith Cushenberry, Brian Decker, Dave Sadler. That was the core of the guys that I progressed with through the bulk of my career. But, when we talk about Edinboro and defense and that defensive back tradition, it's a long line that preceded, that group of 4 of you. Those guys were putting it down long before I stepped foot on that campus. But then, there's that succession of, defensive back. While you may not get all the headlines playing at Edinboro, if you don't have a secondary at that school within that conference, you cannot be successful as a team playing against the offenses and the running backs and the receivers that we faced throughout our tenure. When you talk about other schools, we're talking about Greg Hopkins at Slippery Rock. To look at that man with the eye test outside of pads, you would think nothing. Right. But when you get on that field and you lined up against him, if you're not on your A game, you're going to be embarrassed. Who are those individuals, and looking back over your career at that level, what are the moments and who are the people that stand out for you in terms of competition, in terms of the homie used to love to say, "Turn it up and come with me," by Steve Russell. What was that "Turn it up and come with me" about? And then what were you thinking in context of, trying to press for a championship or advancement into the playoffs?
Well, the people who I played with on those teams, we fed off of each other, and I became successful because of what was happening in front of me. You have the Russell Craze, you have the the Jason Perkins, you have the Ross, you have John Mazura, Anthony Ross, John Mazura. You had those guys that were just up in the front, just killing everything. So we were a tight unit, and every year somebody was gone, but there was always someone else who replaced them, and there would be a turn-up person, and that turn-up person would be us feeding off of each other all the time. I wound up being a captain, so it stuck with me more. I fed off of those persons and was like a sponge, and just wanted to just be a leader and just try to help everybody play on that same level. And my cohorts in the defensive backfield, we fed off of each other the same way. But people who we played against, you mentioned one of them. I started scratching my neck because he scored on me twice in 2 years in a row. And I was a little upset about that. He's in a class by himself. He scored on me twice. But Michael Mann was a great running back for IUP, and he was somebody who was always fun to get up for. Slippery Rock's running back, what's his name? Coleman. Yeah, he would get up for a game, and they were challenging. There are a number of other persons that played in the PSAC that might not necessarily come to mind all these years later, but on the offensive side of the ball for Edinboro, the ones going against the ones was always the hardest. I mean, we could have in camp when we would have our game, that was always the hardest game that I ever played. Of course, the championship games and going into playoffs and fighting hard against an enemy was challenging, but there was nothing like meeting Tom Tedder in that hole on an ISO. We would have to give each other the heads up every now and then and be like, we're gonna go half speed on this one because I need a break. The Michael K. Grice, phenomenal athlete on the offensive ball. Opportunity had, but went on and was successful in playing in the NFL. One of the only people to ever flatline Cortez Kennedy, knocked him down on his behind for the Seattle Seahawks. Facing them guys, Tony Ty, Lester Fry, Larry Jackson. Larry was nice, and of course my two roommates, Jody Dickerson and Lateef Walters, going up against Lateef and Rennie Martin, in practice was like going up against the best receivers in the game, and they both had a combination of speed and agility and size to be able to match with the best of them. So, the competition factor first started at home, going against them ones on our offense, Jack. They wasn't no joke.
As I relayed to you the other night, I'm a person who observes. That I think that's my greatest strength. I'm not always the vocal guy. I may not be the best in any one area, but I think I do a lot of things well, and I learned that by watching a lot. So for me, when I have a long memory bank, And then, when I think of a guy like you, and what you brought to the table in terms of galvanizing guys, motivating guys, and leading guys, you used your voice, number one, to let people know that Steve Russell was in the house. Number two, you were prepared all the time. I can't ever recall a situation where you went into a game and you did not look prepared. The other half of that was that preparation was always backed up with the actions. You made big plays in big moments. I'm thinking about interceptions that you've had, fake punts as the personal protector, where it's a fourth down and whatever, and you get us an extra 25, 30 yards. The kick return that you had in the snow against Slippery Rock to put us up, and when we talk about Lamonte Coleman, he gave us 300 yards in back-to-back years, and they really had us both of those years in the can. But that kick return was huge. It just swung the momentum and really shut the lid on the coffin in terms of that game. But your boldness. I'm sure some of that comes from that influence of, having that Southern grandfather, the influence of, being raised in Pittsburgh, which is rich in culture and self-assuredness. But, your hat, you have the symbol of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And I remember that being a big part of who you are and your personality, and you wore that proudly. Can you talk a little bit about how that experience of pledging Omega Psi Phi fraternity helped further your development as an individual and a man?
Yeah, man. That was just another level of growing and understanding what it's like to be a man. I mean, as I was growing up, I was always surrounded by Omega men, and the men who are Omega men that I was surrounded by, they poured into me in a way that, looking back on it in retrospect, I understand that the influence that Omega has had upon their lives, they didn't have to hesitate to pour it out. Manhood, scholarship, uplift, perseverance are four cardinal principles, man. And I mean, you got to be able to show yourself as a man. You have to be able to recognize that education is an opportunity. And you have to be able to handle adversity and perseverance, and you got to lift people up. You have to pour back into folks. So their pouring into me showed me some of the characteristics of the fraternity in action. And when I did what needed to be done to pursue Omega, it didn't do anything but eclipse, everything that I had learned at that point. So, the learning, the teamwork, the brotherhood, along with organized sports, it shows you what being a team player is like. It shows you what being a part of the family is like, and just as it is with all of these things, even speaking about God makes it even more clear, because we're all a part of God's family, right? We have to see ourselves in other people, and we have to pour ourselves out so that we can help our fellow brothers and sisters be the best that they can be. It's just being humble and being teachable that is critical for that to happen. And becoming an Omega man actually humbled me to a place where I can be able to, as I mentioned a number of times, tempered, to be able to be the best that I can be, and respectful, and to be able to learn from other people, because a lot of people are great athletes, but they are not humble, and they're not teachable, and you can't show them how to get to the next level because they think they know everything, And I think that I learned that as a younger football player in my freshman and sophomore years, and observing some of the leaders who were there at that time. I just did my best version of lead from that perspective. I just had to be me. So, and coming into being a leader, by the time you got there, it's humbling to hear you say that, because I was just trying to do my part in being a team player. And it turns out, they say leaders aren't made, leaders are born. And wearing a crown is a heavy load to carry, but you got to walk it to be able to be successful. And for somebody to come in my direction, knowing that, I am that person for this team, when you came on, it just made it more of a point for me to make sure that I, led by example. So you want to throw the ball my way, I'm going to pick it. If somebody else don't get it first.
As we switch gears, leaving that college experience of your life and putting athletics to bed, in a sense of that being the center focal point of your motivation. You end up hearing that calling and transitioning into the ministry. What was that point that for you where you knew that this was what you were going to make your life's work going forward?
It was when I got married, and when I had another failed attempt to try to make it to the NFL. We didn't talk about how my senior year I got hurt those first 3 games, finished out the season, was able to still excel a bit and lead the team in division and interceptions, but I failed the physical to go to the combines because I had a hairline fracture in my ankle. So that was a damper. And as I tried to wait it out to get a surgery, I didn't really feel like I had it in me at that time. I was very disappointed with myself, and I was tired of football. It takes a special person to go to the NFL. I believe you play those sports all that time, and from pee wee football all the way to college, you can get real tired from that. But I got married, but then I wound up, having another opportunity to try out for the Steelers, and then, I tore my ACL playing flag football with in the city of Pittsburgh with the Cubes. And when I did that, it was a wrap. And that was around the time where I was focused on my son, my wife, wanting to be a better man, knowing that going into the game, knowing that, the chances of becoming an NFL player are very slim when it comes to percentages. I focused on getting my degree. I was married, and I wanted to be back then. I wanted to be Cliff Huxtable. Yeah, I wanted to be Cliff Huxtable in the 90s, right? So, I really those roots, Christian roots, started kicking in. My wife and I, we made it commitment to the Lord and to make sure that we had the spiritual foundation. And one thing just led to another. Opportunities just were coming left and right. I joined the evangelism ministry, and because like football, you can't play football if you don't have passion for it. You can't do anything that you don't have passion for. And when I started learning what God has done for me, and when I started interpreting and understanding and applying the skills that we learned growing up, and the experiences that we have in life from Scripture, it just became clear through the Word, through people, And through my experience, that this was the path that I needed to take. And because I've always been the type of person that doesn't go into something half-heartedly, because if I'm going to jump in, I'm jumping in, and I did. And I learned a lot from the person who was my pastor, Reverend Dr. William Houston Curtis. Phenomenal brother. Was able to say things and show me things that about scripture and about life that made me want to be that kind of influence on people. And I did it, and the next thing you know, I'm up there being the chief slave. Yeah, I'm up there on the cross, just like the Lord. No, that's just the phrase that we like to use. As I'm just a servant, helping people. I think that's the other thing about it that I think is very important. It's more than just that tingly feeling in my stomach. That it was consistent. When you help people, when you come from an inner city and struggles, you've experienced struggles, you see people struggling and you don't like it, and you want to do something about it. I've always had that kind of drive, whether it is helping an old lady carry her grocery bags to her car, or, helping a little girl get her dog or cat out of a tree. I'm simplifying it, but it just makes you feel good to help people get what they need. And that's where I was, man. And I pursued it. And I still don't think that there's anything else that I would want to do in this world. That injury kind of makes me identify myself with Jacob. In the Bible, Jacob was wrestling with God, had a limp, and changed his name from Jacob to Israel. And once he agreed with God and didn't let God go, God gave him opportunities to do things for people. And that's just what I'm excited about, doing things for people in this world.
As we progress, can you share a little bit of that application of what you learned through athletics, your experiences as you're coming up, part of being that pastor and minister? How does all that connect into being a husband and then being the father of three adult children at this point? But you become a father as a young man, and then you're in the midst of experiencing your glory and what that youthful energy affords you in terms of athletics. But once you start progressing into the 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 load and the responsibility that comes with manhood, that comes with being a husband and a partner, and guiding, the children that you create to go the right way and get what's meant for them. Um, you know, what did you take from athletics and bring to being a husband and a father?
Uh, I would say the humility aspect of it, because as much as I was able to succeed and interpret myself and come across as a leader, I never felt like I have arrived. I always known that I can get better, and because I don't know everything, I'm willing to be taught and teachable. That's just a part of the humility. I think that one of the things that helps me to do what I do is to not act like I have arrived and be honest. Like Killer Mike has a record out now with a new record out, and Dave Chappelle is on one of the songs. I think the song is called "Run," and he said, "Nobody asked you to be perfect; just asked you to be honest." And then he goes on and says, "Lead, just lead." and just be honest, and I think that that's true. I mean, Dave Chappelle's a genius. I'm not trying to give more honor to the Buckeye State than I do any other states. It's just coming out and just being honest. Dave Chappelle is the GOAT. Yeah. So I just try to just be real with people. I mean, it's the information that I learned in Scripture, the discipline that I've applied in the craft, and the love that I have for people, for family, just affords me the opportunity to just be open and honest, and to be welcoming, and let people know that we're in the struggle that we're in together, because we can't make it out of this thing separate. And that's where the teamwork comes in. You know what I mean? Everybody just do your part. And I just try to do mine.
In terms of having someone to follow, because when you go into new situations, it's impossible to know the final answer to the test when you're in the very beginnings of studying the chapter, right? Mm. So, I give you a lot of credit for, and not in a direct way, but in an indirect way, for giving me an example to find myself as a young man being away from home, not knowing if I have what it takes to not only, be a college football player, but to get a degree. You just plying your craft and just being you in your natural organic state, it showed me that was possible. And then by the time I was in my fourth year, in my fifth year of college, I knew I wasn't leaving away from that place without paper in hand, because I had seen the examples of those guys that were before me, come from situations, wherever that may be, inner city, rural, suburb, what have you. But just that it's possible to have the best of both worlds, play football, get your grades, get this degree, take the next step. When you think about, all of those experiences that you had, the glory days, the successes, the accolades, as a player, if you had one more down to go back and relive a moment in time, as it relates to being a player, where would that be for you? Who would you be with? Set that up for us if you had that one more down.
Wow. If I had that one more down, I would go all the way back to high school. I would go all the way back to high school to that senior day when I had the opportunity to be around all of my family that was still here at that time. It was a great period in my life to be able to have my parents, my grandparents, my friends, close friends who have passed on. Life is so short, man, and time is filled with swift transition, as we say, the old hymn says, and I think we take a lot of things for granted, and now that I'm turning 53 on Sunday. I'm turning 53 on Sunday. And when I look back on, my life and think about all the people who are not here anymore, it kind of makes me pause and thank God that I'm still here, and to kind of focus on the good memories that I have of the people who are gone. So I don't know what you were. I don't know if that answers your question. For Edinboro, it would. I don't know what it would be.
Well, the way that you answered is perfect. It's whatever you deem it to be, and whatever that question means to you. So it's open-ended, and
Yeah.
it's meant to land exactly how you answered it. It's that reflection, that thought process of what's most important to you and what comes to the top in life. It doesn't have to always be on the field. We've had a multitude of answers that have come from different perspectives, but it always comes from a real genuine place. So that's why we ask it that way.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of where you've ended up, because where you come from. And I don't want to characterize city life as always rough, because it's, I think you get a lot of different stereotypes and uh, just cover all answers when it comes to Black men, when it comes to coming from situations that may not be as desirable as others. It shapes you, it molds you, it gives you that fuel that you need to succeed in the face of things that might be difficult and uncomfortable. I think the game of football and being a competitive athlete also does the same thing. It forges you and tests you in a variety of ways. For you to make ministry your life's work, for you to land in a city like Baltimore, which I'm familiar with. I spent 2.5 years living in that area. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the weak. And you have to have a personality and a spirit that's about endurance, that's about meeting challenges. And, the accolades that you've been afforded throughout your life, the opportunities, the blessings that you've been afforded throughout your life, you were created for that, and just to see and be an observer in another realm and watch you be successful, watch you be a guy that draws people to him. It's just a mirror of that same guy that I met back in '93, who was just doing it on in another space and on another platform, displaying what you were made to do right from the door. So I appreciate you, taking time out of your busy schedule, coming on and, spending an hour and some minutes with me to give me those thoughts, those memories. I thank you for being a guest today. And hopefully, we'll have a little bit more frequent contact with each other, even if it's just a check-in to see how
No
things
doubt.
is going.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Keep
Absolutely.
lifting people up, man. Keep being that example, and hopefully those 3 kids go on and make you proud and continue on that Russell name.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that, man. Thanks for having me on, man. It means a lot to me. Very encouraging. I like what you guys are doing. Keep up the good work, man. Anything you need, let me know.
No doubt.